The apartment complex was old, built sometime in the 1950s, and it showed. The halls were narrow and dimly lit. The floor creaked with every step, and a faint musty smell lingered in the air. Still, the rent was cheap, and the location was ideal for someone who worked late like I did. I didn't need luxury, just a place to sleep. So, when I signed the lease, I was ready to accept the building's quirks. My unit was on the third floor, at the end of a long hallway that always felt a little too quiet. There were other tenants on my floor, but I rarely saw them. Once in a while, I'd hear the muffled sounds of TV or distant conversations through the walls, but never directly. It was as if everyone kept to themselves, silently moving through the building like ghosts. It didn't take long for me to notice something was off. On my second night there, I woke up to a faint sound, like the scraping of furniture across a hardwood floor. It came from the living room. At first, I thought maybe I'd left a window open and a gust of wind had knocked something over. But when I went to check, everything was in place. The sounds continued over the next few weeks. Sometimes it was the scraping of furniture. Other times, it was a dull thud, like something heavy being dropped on the floor. I'd searched the apartment, but everything was always as I'd left it. I started to question my sanity, wondering if I was just hearing things. Then one night, something changed. I was lying in bed, half awake, when I noticed the sound again. This time, it was different. It was coming from the walls. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, like a dull rustling or shuffling, as if someone were moving around inside the walls themselves. I sat up, listening intently. The noise seemed to shift positions, first near the corner of the room, then behind the bed, then by the closet. It stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence that felt like a held breath. I told the landlord about it the next day, but he just shrugged and said, "Old buildings make noise. It's probably just the pipes or rats." I didn't press him, though his dismissive tone unsettled me. If there were rats in the walls, it was a lot bigger problem than he seemed to care about. One night, I woke up to an odd sensation, a kind of pressure in the air, like the atmosphere had thickened. The room felt different. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like the space was wrong, somehow. I turned on the light and froze. My bed was still in the same spot, but the room itself looked different, subtly altered in a way I couldn't quite pinpoint. Then I noticed the window. It was on the wrong wall. I was certain it had always been directly across from the bedroom door, but now it was positioned to the left, beside the closet. The strange thing was, it didn't look out of place. It fit perfectly, as if it had always been there. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if I was still dreaming, but the change was undeniable. I even found a faint outline of the old window's position on the opposite wall, the paint slightly darker where it used to be. I didn't sleep much after that. The sounds continued, always shifting, moving, as though the apartment itself were alive. The walls seemed to breathe at times. The floor slanted slightly more one day and slightly less the next. The changes were always minor, but there. One day, I came home from work and noticed something else had moved. The kitchen was slightly smaller than it had been. It wasn't immediately obvious, but the counter was closer to the fridge than I remembered, as if the walls had squeezed inward just a little. I checked the measurements. Sure enough, it was about a foot narrower than the last time I had checked. I asked my neighbor if he'd noticed anything unusual, but he looked at me like I was crazy. "It's an old building," he said dismissively. "Things settle, walls shift. You're imagining things." But I wasn't imagining it. The apartment was changing, almost imperceptibly, a little more each day. Then I started finding things that didn't belong to me. It started with small objects, an old lighter that I'd never seen before, a pair of reading glasses on the bathroom counter, a dusty, crumpled hat shoved in the back of the closet. I hadn't put them there. I lived alone. I thought maybe the previous tenant had left some things behind, but then I found the note. It was folded neatly and tucked under my bed, written on yellowing paper. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, as if written by someone in a hurry. It read, "Asterisk, do not trust the rooms. They move when you are not looking. Do not sleep too deeply. It will get worse, asterisk." I felt a chill creep up my spine. Whoever wrote the note had experienced the same things I had. I considered leaving, breaking the lease, and finding somewhere else, but I hesitated. Part of me needed to know what was happening, what the truth behind this place was. Over the next few weeks, the changes grew more drastic. The bathroom door moved 4 inches to the right. The ceiling in the hallway seemed to lower slightly, and the closet seemed to expand, almost as if the walls were pushing outward into some hidden space. One morning, I walked into the living room to find that the entire layout had shifted. The furniture was arranged in a perfect mirror image of how I had left it the night before. I hadn't moved a thing. I became obsessed. I started marking the walls with chalk, measuring distances, taking photos to prove to myself that the changes were real. And they were. Each day, the marks I'd made would shift, the measurements would be off, the photos would show subtle but undeniable changes. It was as if the apartment was slowly warping into something else, something unrecognizable. One night, I heard a loud crash, like furniture toppling over. I rushed to the living room, but nothing was out of place, at least, not at first glance. Then I saw it. A door. It was set into the far wall, a door that had not been there before. It looked old, the wood cracked and splintered, the handle tarnished and rusted. It seemed out of place, like it didn't belong in a modern apartment. I hesitated, but a strange compulsion drew me toward it. I reached for the handle, my hand trembling. When I opened the door, there was no room on the other side. No closet, no hallway, just darkness, impossibly deep, impenetrable darkness. The kind that seemed to swallow the light and absorb sound. I leaned in closer, squinting to see if there was anything inside, and that's when I heard it, a faint whisper, like a voice just out of earshot. I slammed the door shut and backed away, my heart racing. I wanted to leave, to get out of that cursed place, but the moment I turned around, I froze. The apartment had changed again. The walls seemed closer, the ceiling lower. The door I had just come through was gone, replaced by a blank wall. I bolted for the front door, but it wasn't where it was supposed to be. The entryway had shifted, and the door was now at the far end of the hall, a distance that seemed to stretch further the more I ran. My breathing grew ragged as I sprinted for the exit, feeling the walls closing in, the air thickening. When I finally reached the door and flung it open, I was not in the hallway. I was in the same living room I had just fled. Only now it looked even more distorted. The furniture was gone. The floors slanted at odd angles, and that old door stood in the center of the room. It was open. I don't know how long I wandered the endless maze that my apartment had become. The rooms kept shifting, rearranging themselves like a puzzle that never had a solution. I would open a door only to find another room identical to the last, sometimes with impossible changes. A window that opened to nothing, a mirror reflecting a place I didn't recognize. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they were all I could hear. I am writing this now, sitting in a room that I don't recognize. The walls are bare, the air is cold, and the door has disappeared. I don't know how long I've been here. Days, weeks, maybe even longer. The rooms keep shifting, changing when I'm not looking. And now, the whispers are coming from inside the walls.